This is Simon Shackleton, aka Elite Force, Zodiac Cartel, Lunatic Calm, and the Shadowmaker, and you're listening to the Liverpool Connection Podcast, music and football episodes.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Liverpool Connection Podcast. I'm your host Daz. This is music and football episode where I bring on a DJ, producer, musician to talk about the two loves, which are music and football. My next guest I have been a massive fan on for a very, very long time, going on 20 plus years. So that's probably showing my age and his age as well. But he goes under many monikers, Elite Force, Zodiac Cartel, Shack, now the Shadowmaker, but best of all, Simon Shackleton. Welcome to the pod, mate. It is an absolute pleasure to have you.
Oh, thanks, man. It's a real thrill to be here and, to be amongst Liverpool friends as well, I think is a bit of a treat, especially this week, having just won the league. So
and if people didn't know, Simon is a Liverpool supporter, which in my book is already struck gold. But I think every Liverpool supporter is walking on cloud nine.
Amazing.
It's I think when Klopp left, or Klopp said last January he was leaving. It really hit me because I was getting pinged on my phone at like 5 o'clock in the morning from my mates. And, I woke up half asleep going, what is this? Like Klopp leaving? Like, are you having a laugh? Then, obviously I got on Sky and it was true. And he looked knackered,
Yeah,
he did. But it was just one of those where it felt like part of your family. And he's not dead. I think we kind of mourned him for 6 months, as Liverpool fans do. But it was just one of those where it's like, no, this can't be true. And to go from Klopp to Slot, who I had no idea, I knew nothing about him. As soon as I knew he was coming in, I got on the internet and looked him up. But still, I was like, well, we know how Dutch managers do in the Premier League. Ten Hag for United. But I want to know, Simon, first off, how are you a Liverpool supporter?
Oh man, I've been a Liverpool supporter now for 45 years or more. It kind of came about. My parents were from the northwest of England, but they moved to southeast England when actually before I was born. So all of the family was up in the northwest, but I was kind of born and brought up in the southeast. And when I was a kid, the only I lived in a relatively small town called Dartford, which is famous for the Dartford Tunnel, and that's about it. It was a pretty grim place to be brought up, but my dad took me to see Dartford play a couple of times, and I was just so into football as a kid. And he took me there, I think, thinking that that this isn't what it's like on the TV. So I'm going to take him here. He's going to hate it. We'll never have to do this again. And I was like, can I get a season ticket? And so, so I used to go and see Dartford play for 2 or 3 years, pretty much, every home game. But at the same time, I was by then I'd already been a big kind of Liverpool supporter for years, but never really got the chance to go to the games as a kid. And then when I left home and I went to university, I had a really good friend at Exeter University who was a Scouser, and his dad lived about half a mile away from Anfield. And so he was able to pick up tickets. And we used to do this crazy kind of road trip every few weeks up from up from Exeter in Devon, and it was like a 500-mile round trip or something. But we'd go to see a bunch of the games there, and then when I left Exeter, moved up to London, and he moved up to London as well. So we used to get as many tickets as we could to the sort of away games in London. So yeah, that's how it all came about, and it's just in my blood, really. You know.
Who's your childhood footballing hero?
It's a good question. I'd say probably Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. Yeah, I mean, I kind of first got into Liverpool around the sort of Keegan Toshak era, and but yeah, like those were amazing times to be a Liverpool supporter, and there were so many players that I absolutely love, like Alan Hansen and stuff back then. And just, he just kind of walked on water. Yeah, it was an awesome time to be a Liverpool fan, and I've never lost them. Funnily enough, I moved to the States nearly 2 years ago now. I now live in Colorado, and I don't DJ that often these days. It's much more of a sort of sporadic thing. So for many years, I was just traveling every weekend. I was constantly on the road, constantly touring, and it's not that I lost. I didn't really lose football, but I lost the opportunity to go and see games live. And interestingly enough, since I moved to the US, because of the time differences and all the rest of it, it actually fits quite comfortably in with my day to day at the weekend. So I'm usually up at 6 or 7 anyway, most days. And, I get all the games here on Peacock, and I've probably watched more Premier League football since I moved here than I had in the last sort of 10 years combined. So it's been quite a joy, actually, being out here and just getting to experience it a bit more,
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, like, because back home you have the 3 p.m. like blackouts, which I still don't understand, because that's ideal. But yeah, coming over here, I just wish there was like one package though, because you've got Peacock
Yeah.
for Premier League, and then I've got to get Sling, I've got to get Paramount for Champions League, then you've got ESPN for League Cup or FA Cup. So I just wish there was one package. But yeah, the time is great. We could nighttime games at 2 o'clock over here, and then like you said, during the weekend, you're already, finished with the games, and you've still got the rest of the day. It's really good.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the only ones that are a little bit brutal is like a 12:30 kickoff in the UK, and you're up at 5:30 in our time zone. And yeah, sometimes I'll miss the first half of those. It just depends who we're playing, really.
Well, it's nice to just roll out of bed and get on the couch in the living room, like I do. 6:30 in the morning is the early ones. I try and keep quiet because I've got four girls. But now it's great because they're taking a massive interest in watching Daddy be happy.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
They're singing the songs and everything. So, but yeah, I actually went down the pub for the first time in a long time for the celebrations, and it's just great to see. I mean, it's funny, especially now that you're over here. Like if you went to, I think Colorado have also the Denver group have an official supporters group. If you went to their pub, you'll see the same, like you'll hear the same song sung. You'll see the same like amount of passion, and I think when I first came over there, some of my mates were, having a laugh like, Americans don't know this and they don't know that. They know a lot about football,
Yeah.
And I was really surprised. And just to see the passion from them, you can get that whether you're Anfield, whether you're in Timbuktu, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in Denver, Colorado, Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
It's all the same. And I love that.
Yeah, totally. Like one of the one of the best renditions of "You'll Never Walk Alone" that I've seen on YouTube is from Melbourne in
Mm-hmm.
Australia, and it's they were playing a pre-season friendly out there a few years ago, and it's amazing. There's so many people in floods of tears in the stadium. There's 90,000 people there. Everyone's just absolutely loving it, and yeah, you're right. It's everywhere, and there's people who share our passion for it all over the world, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think the only time I'd be crying is when I have to pay the ticket prices to go to Anfield. It's like gold dust now.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
my first game was 76. It was Keegan's last season. He broke my heart. He was my childhood hero, and after a year he left, I was not happy. Um,
yeah,
but I used to pay what, £1.50 or something like that. Well, I didn't. I used to go underneath my granddad would push me under the turnstiles. But now it's just like it's so expensive.
it
It's
is. It's crazy.
and I do, this whole like I don't like how we kind of view day trippers. There's a big thing of obviously, you want the club to be obviously local. You want as many Scousers in there as possible, but it's also a global sport now. It's also a global fan base. And, some lads in India saves up all year and then flies to Liverpool for the day or for 2 days. How can anybody, be pissed off? That's what I don't understand, and they spend money in the club shop. Well, fair play to him. That's
Yeah,
money, and I just think there's this sometimes disconnect that I don't like about that.
yeah. I think just kind of understanding that all of these huge kind of sports clubs, regardless of what sport it is, they are global brands, and it takes like that kid that you're talking about in India, like could be 10 years saving up to take that trip. And honestly, I think people who are that committed to anything just deserve a huge amount of respect for just putting everything into it and it meaning so much for them. It's a difficult circle to square, isn't it? Because like you say, it's that club, I think especially, has so long been embedded in the community and as just part of the spirit of that city, that you can understand it being a Scouser and living in Liverpool still and living within a stone's throw of the ground. You can understand it like people getting priced out and all the rest of it. And it is a shame. It is sort of changing times over the last sort of 50 or 60 years. There's been such a huge change, I think, since we first got into football, back in the day. Like you like I just remember for years and years, the only football you got to see, unless you actually went to see it live, was whatever they chose to feature on Match of the Day or on the big match on ITV, which was usually shite because it was just London clubs. But yeah, you were lucky if you caught the highlights of games. And that's changed so much now. There's just so much access and stuff. It's certainly cool for me, not being in a position to get to Anfield at all these days, being that I'm in the US. So yeah, very very much changing times, but I agree with you. I think the people who are that committed just deserve all the respect in the world, really.
What's your favourite Liverpool match throughout the years?
Oh my god. Um,
I know there's plenty.
I would. Oh my god. Yeah. I mean, in recent times, I suppose the Barcelona comeback at Anfield was just that. The moment that specific moment with Trent's corner as well was just. It was just unbelievable. It was like absolute hysteria just watching that game. And then I don't know, going back to stuff like Istanbul as well was just, oh yeah, just so many, so many.
Yeah, we never do anything easy. I'll tell you
No,
that.
no, not so. That was what was so. It was really interesting watching the 5-1 with Tottenham at the weekend as well. It's like we almost had to give them a goal early in the game just to kind of spool things up and be like, okay, now we've got somebody to play because they're not really at the moment they're not really kind of serious opposition at all. But it's almost like we needed to make a game of it, and you could feel the minute that they scored, you could feel the whole crowd just sort of elevate and get louder and louder. And it was just like what 5 minutes later, it was just inevitable. We were going to win that game, you know.
It was absolute mayhem. I think that's one of the things I've learned about Liverpool. It doesn't matter if we go behind.
Yeah,
We're gonna find a way to win, and I think this season we've proved that. It might not have been like some of the best football I've ever watched, but
yeah,
I don't care, and I do get a bit pissed off with this punditry where we're lucky to win the league because the league's been shite, or injuries to Arsenal, or blah blah, or Rodri missing
yeah,
for City. One player missing for City. Is that why they're doing bad? No,
yeah.
it's because Liverpool stepped up and we've been very consistent. I mean, we've only lost 2 matches.
I know it's incredible, and like that came across I think almost the turning point of the season, if there was a turning point, was almost the first game against Ipswich when the first half we were really poor, we were really sluggish, didn't feel like we got out of first gear, and then everyone went in at half time. Obviously, Slot gives his team talk, and then I think we won that game 3-2 or something. It was a proper kind of comeback, and you just thought, oh, this team's got it's definitely there's some proper resilience going on here, and it's almost like ever since then, the whole season they've just been like a sort of juggernaut, really. And yeah, I mean, it's I get really bored of hearing that as well, of like it's been an easy this or that. Like they've had to win games in just about every conceivable way this season, and it hasn't always been the prettiest, but that's what winners do, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially if you're a younger supporter, you want these 4-5 nils. You want it to be like FIFA, like
Yeah,
playing FIFA, but that's not the real world.
yeah,
I'll take 38 games of 1-nils
yeah,
if we win the title. I'm just from the old school, and I think when we beat City in, I think it was late October or November,
yeah,
I was like, it's on. And,
yeah,
Arsenal didn't even have injuries up until then. So this injury thing is a joke to me because, we had Alisson out, we had Jota out, we had Canute out, we've had Trent out, we've had Robbo out for a while. So this whole like injury nonsense, every team gets injuries. And everyone that's come in has done the job. You know,
yeah,
I feel bad for Endo and Elliott. They haven't had the look in that they probably wanted, but they're part of the squad who have won this league, and every player has put in what's needed.
yeah,
And Slot, to me, has been a bit better than Klopp in man management because remember that first game against Ipswich, Kwanzaa had a terrible first half, and Slot said, "That's it. You're not coming out for the second half,"
yeah,
and he'll sub a player he thinks is not playing well, while Klopp would let them try and play their way out of not playing well, and that's one thing I like about Slot. The comparison is, we have again, and the other one is we've got Klopp's team. Yes,
yeah.
we have the same players, but Slot plays a little bit different than what Klopp does. Gung ho football. We've kind of Slot's reeled it back a bit, and we're more tactical, I think, with Slot.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think what's been really cool to see this season as well, and it's not as kind of it's not as heavy metal. There's not as many fireworks necessarily, but I've really enjoyed the way that at 2-0 up, he just shuts the game down. That you're not like chasing we could win this 6 or 7. It's and I think that's a big factor in why we've had so few kind of injuries this season, because he's managed the tempo of the games really, really masterfully, and it's been great to see.
Yeah, I cannot wait. May 25th, when Verge and the lads hoist number 20. United can't sing that anymore, which makes me even happier. But just winning number 20, the narrative of winning 2 in 35, I'd rather go with 1-2 in 5 years.
Yeah, right.
It just sounds better.
Yeah. It feels a lot better, doesn't it?
It does, but I just cannot wait. And obviously, the parade is just going to be absolutely insane. It's on a bank holiday as well, I believe.
Oh my God, crazy!
26th in Liverpool. Like, if you can get there, because it will be absolutely amazing.
Oh, I wish.
Now I want to talk to you, obviously, about the music. Your roots and early influences. Like, what was playing in your house? Like your mum and dad, did they have any influence on your musical tastes?
I mean, I wouldn't say they had a huge influence. I mean, I remember my first kind of musical memories were listening to Louis Armstrong. My dad was really into kind of trad jazz, some modern jazz as well. But when I was like 2 or 3, I remember my parents they used to tell me this story of us driving on this road trip, and they were singing a song to me to try and get me to sleep in the back of the car, and I basically sang it back to them pitch perfect when I was 2 or 3 years old, and they knew I kind of had something musical going on. So I think when I was 4 or 5, they started playing music quite regularly in the lounge at home, and I'd dance around to it and all the rest of it. And actually I started piano lessons when I was 5 or 6. So, and to be fair to them as well, they actually sent me to a private school when I was about 9, because the local schools wouldn't allow you to do music unless they had a certain number of people signing up to do the lessons, and they never did. So music was just not something that was really taught. And we didn't come from a wealthy family, but they just prioritized that early kind of love of music that they saw in me, and just did everything they could to pay for the schooling. And I was very grateful for that.
You're always in bands, because obviously, I've read that you're in a band with Thom Yorke, which is absolutely amazing. to be in a band with him and then see, his trajectory in music. Was that during uni?
Yeah, that was at university. I mean, I'd been when I was at school. From about 13 or 14 onwards, I was in a band there, actually with with Howie, who's the guy that we formed Lunatic Calm and Flicker Noise before that. And yeah, at university, I got to know Thom quite early on, because he basically somehow managed to convince the university to give him the job as the student DJ at the big student night that happened at Exeter. And it was big as well. It was like 1,200 people. It was packed every week. And, it was a real kind of mix of everything from people that are into kind of acid house, people that are into like floppy haired indie, to industrial music, to Stone Roses, the Mondays. And he used to play for 5 hours and try to keep everybody happy. That was the brief, basically. And I used to go down with him, because he was getting paid, I think, 60 quid to do that job for 5 hours. But it meant that unlike me, he was able to go out and buy a load of vinyl, and then we'd make sure we got there and fired up the sound system about an hour early, and listened to all these new kind of white labels that he bought. And then when he left Exeter, I basically took his job. I just said, I'll do that. And I'd never DJed before. And, there was a bit of a baptism of fire. I'd never had decks, I'd never played out or anything, but I was like, it can't be that difficult. And first sets were 5-hour sets to this quite demanding audience. But, like musically, I also liked pretty much everything from that entire spectrum of music. So it was really like me turning up and just sort of playing my record collection. And at the same time, like, I knew Thom for 2 years when I was at Exeter, and we bonded over music, obviously very early on, and also over politics. We were both quite sort of politically active. At the time, it was like poll tax and student loans and all the rest of it, and it just kind of made sense that we'd start making music together. So we formed a band called the Headless Chickens, and we did a whole bunch of shows over a couple of years there. So
no, it's just so incredible. Like I said, he does his stuff, he does his solo stuff, and it is funny because he was on the Boiler Room one time, and he didn't really like beat match.
Yeah.
And he got this whole backlash on there, and I was like, "You're missing the point." He's playing songs that he likes, and not every time you don't have to beat match to kind of have a journey. And I just thought, I looked at his track list and I was like, wow. But the people behind him, just, you could tell they just didn't understand what was going on. And Thom was just, doing his little head shake, and he was loving it. And I think that's what you want from a DJ. But going from that, did you, I mean, obviously you went to uni and stuff. Did you think like, all right, I'm not, the more you DJ, you get obviously better. Were you thinking, I could do this, more and more?
Yeah, I mean, let's think. I mean, I really enjoyed those sets at Exeter, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I actually handed over the reins to Felix Buxton from Basement Jacks, and he. I mean, it was a very rich sort of fertile time for people who have gone on to do quite well in music, and he was a good friend of mine as well, and he actually moved into the house that I left, that I'd been living in for a year or two after I left Exeter. But I really enjoyed it. But when I went out and I went club. It wasn't really clubbing. I just went to acid house parties out on Dartmoor. That for me was proper dance music, and like acid house was the big turning point for me personally. Was that music specifically, and going out to some of those raves, and there was even doing that at the time, I think was quite a political statement, because I mean, aside from anything, you'd have the police literally trying to stop you get there, and you'd be picking up phone calls from call boxes, and everybody. It was a mad thing that we did every sort of other weekend, and I kind of love that side of it. But I didn't really have much of an opportunity to play those kind of sets. I was much more eclectic. And when I did try to play sets that were very sort of streamlined into kind of early techno and house music and acid house especially, I always found it got a little bit sort of restricted, and I did enjoy that like expansive eclecticism really. When I left Exeter and I moved up to London, I was really all about Lunatic Calm. Well, at the time we were called Flicker Noise, Flicker noise was the kind of precursor, the experimental phase of just trying to figure out how to make electronic music without having to go into like a 500 quid a day recording studio. And it wasn't like you could just go on YouTube and learn how to do it. It was literally years and years of just grafting, getting enough money to buy some gear, learning out how to use and abuse it. And eventually, we sort of transitioned into Lunatic Calm. And the DJing wasn't really that much of a part of that until we started going out on tour as Lunatic Calm in '97. And at the same time, I just released my first Elite Force stuff, and I just set up a label called Fused and Bruised. And we started having label parties and all the rest of it. And then I really kind of got back into DJing properly. And I think around that time, I mean, I've always been quite an eclectic DJ, but around that time, breaks and big beat was starting to blow up, which actually catered for that sense of eclecticism that I really liked, so.
Well, I think Lunatic Calm for me was more big beat. It just suited, the like student indie dance scene, and then obviously Elite Force was full on breaks. Now, when the call came for you to tour the States with Crystal Method, that must have been like, all right, that this is a full on like tour, get on a bus, with a couple of mates and have a good time. I mean, that must have been really cool for you.
It was wild. I mean, we like the US. We had an interesting experience with Lunatic Calm because we'd signed the deal that we signed was with MCA, Universal, and we really got screwed by them. It was such a shame because we had this really cool A&R guy. Universal had said, like, MCA just said, like, we'll give you your own imprint and you just start knocking out some tunes and we'll build up some underground following. And as a result of the very first thing we put out, which is a track called Sentista, we actually got a call from Fatboy Slim saying, do you need any remixes doing? We said, well, yeah, sure. We've got an album coming out, and we sent him the first single, which was Roll the Dice. And he agreed to remix it and was really into it, which was amazing. And so we built up this real kind of head of steam, and then we did a video for Leave You Far Behind, which was our second single from the album. And then just before the album came out, things got really weird with the record company. They were kind of like, well, we need this to go top 40, this track, because if it doesn't, we're going to drop you, basically, because that's what we're looking for. We're kind of, well, this isn't like a pop song or anything. This is just a sort of savage bit of electronic punk or whatever. And this advert had just come up, which they wanted to use Leave You Far Behind on. And the advert basically took the piss out of the Prodigy. And in '97, Fat of the Land and everything, the Prodigy were the absolute benchmark high for electronic music in the UK. We just said, we can't be associated with basically using our music to basically take the piss out of the Prodigy. And they said, well, put it this way, if you don't, then we're not going to release your album, which was due out 3 weeks later. And we were just like, all of a sudden, like the corporate hammer came down and we were like, oh my God. And we agreed to do it. And then the next week there was this like huge feature piece in NME saying, who are these scumbags taking the piss out of the Prodigy and all the rest of it? And we were like, we told you that was going to happen. And then the record company, from that day onwards, they fired the A&R man who'd been working with us the whole time, and they never ever picked up the phone to us again, and just left us stuck in a contract for 3 or 4 years that they wouldn't let us out of. And in the meantime, we regrouped. Our manager moved to the US. We started getting a whole bunch of movie licenses and stuff out there. And then the Crystal Method tour kind of came. Sorry, this is a rambling as hell answer,
Oh,
but yeah, the Crystal Method tour came up, and we absolutely jumped at it. But coming out to the US and playing live was extraordinary, because it really felt like it was, especially as far as the music we were playing goes, it felt like it was very, very early for electronic music. Like nobody really understood quite what it was or what they liked. And I think as a result, the crowds that were coming, that were really aggregated around the Crystal Method, were actually really open-minded, and a lot of them came from that sort of rock heritage. But Crystal Method were like their kind of gateway into electronic music. And actually in the UK, as you probably know, they weren't, nobody really knew who they were at all at the time, because everyone was, it's all about the Chemical Brothers and Prodigy, Underworld, Left Field, whatever. So coming out here, it felt like a golden opportunity, because the door was open. Nobody really knew what to expect from us, and we absolutely kicked the shit out of it on that tour. It was really, really, it was a wild sort of 5 or 6 week ride, but we had some amazing shows when we were out here.
Well, I think for the Crystal Method, it must have been a little difficult as well, because they were kind of put in to the view of they're the Chemical Brothers of the US. So I know Scott. I've chatted with him before, and to have that on your shoulders, but they did it their own way, and I Get Busy Child was frigging massive.
Huge.
It was something different, and I just don't like when you try and compare, Crystal Method to Chemical Brothers. They're totally different. If you really listen to the tracks, they're just so different, and I just think everyone, especially in the music business, they want to pigeonhole you. And I think that's one thing that you have never really been pigeonholed. If you're Elite Force, you're listening to the breaks, and then all of a sudden Zodiac Cartel comes along, and you're like, wait, what? Whoa, and then you find out that it's you, and then you're like, yeah, makes sense. So I think you've reinvented yourself over and over again, and I think that's the best compliment I can give you.
Thanks.
Is as you know, the music business, they don't care. They'll stab you in the back. They'll talk to you face to face and go, "We want to make you, a superstar." You turn your back, the knife is in there, and you're gone from the label. It's that quickly.
Yeah, and I think as a definitely as a consequence of those experiences with major labels, I think that really reinforced a kind of need in me to be fiercely independent, and that's why I set up Fused and Bruised, which is my first label. I then did a label called UNA, and I was signed to various other labels sort of intermittently when I often just had more music than I could realistically put out. And that was like with Fused and Bruised, we had, Elite Force, Fracas, Future Core, Synchromesh, Dodeca, and all of those were me. Mm-hmm. And actually in my contract with MCA is I wasn't allowed to release any of that. I wasn't allowed to release under any different names. I was just like, so that's why for a long time I kept it completely under the radar. But once I got out of that contract, it's like, yeah, I'm doing what the fuck I want from this point onwards, So
well, that's what you want as an artist. I just hate this, like, paint by numbers music, which is mostly top 40. It's there's an image there. There's auto tune. Like to me, when you see a band live and they sound better than what the recorded album sounds like, then they're real. While you get these pop stars, once they actually sing live, you're just like, oh my god, that is awful. But people go with it and they pay, so much money to go see this shite, and that's what it is. It's just it's like, to me, a panto performance,
Yeah.
and I don't understand it because there's no heart and soul in it. It's just all about.
Yeah, I just think that there's an element to music which runs through every genre you can name. It's incredibly conservative a lot of the time, and people I think especially over the last few years, like, marketing is the tail that's wagging the dog a lot of the time. And so, you know, take a electronic music genre like tech house or something. It is painfully generic. There's an entire industry that is based around providing people with all the loops they need to combine in different orders to create the Beatport top 10, basically. And more than 95, probably 99% of people making music in that particular genre are just painting by numbers. It's like a coloring book. Really, there's no risk, there's no artistry, and the biggest complaint I have about that is there's no self-expression of an idea or an emotion or communicating something that is human. And people talk about how AI is super dangerous and it's taking our jobs. We've already done that without AI. People are creating identikit nonsense all the time, and that's without AI. AI might make it easier for those people to do it on a single button push, but I mean, are the results going to be any better or worse than 99% of what you hear? Probably not.
Well, it's not even tech house. I mean, tech house to me is, Mr. C, Lalo, and Bushwhacker. That
Totally.
evil Eddie Richards. It's not just one big drop, and that's what this so-called Beatport top 10 tech house is. It's just one big drop after another, and it's a 2-minute track now
Yeah.
because that seems to be what people's attention span is. I mean,
Yeah.
same with DJing. I would love to hear a 3-hour DJ set, not 1 hour. What can you do in 1 hour? Just
Yeah.
play the bangers. I can just put on a best of compilation if I want to hear bangers. I want to hear a DJ work the decks. I want to see them sweat. That's the whole point, isn't it? I mean, we come from a time, and we're going to sound like old farts, but we come from a time where the DJ booth was in the corner. You could barely see them. There was a couple of lights, but everybody wasn't facing the DJ. Everybody was doing their own thing, and I think I missed that. I get that this is people's their time, the youngsters' time. The phone thing gets on my fucking nerves. I just don't understand it. If you're there, dance music. The word dance is in the actual word dance.
Yeah.
Why aren't you dancing? Why have you got your phone out? I don't mind, like, taking a video here and there, but like, you see these videos on YouTube, and there's people just, they have the phones up constantly. I saw one with AIM and Ramper, and they showed it from the booth, and there's more people now in the booth than than there is on the. I don't understand that, but he's looking out, and there's nothing but phones. That's soulless to me.
Yeah.
You can call me an old fart, or you need to get with the times, but that's soulless. Dance music is not soulless.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think that since 2012, I think was a really key turning point, because smartphones in 2012 became ubiquitous. Everybody had one. It also coincided with the year when Facebook introduced, like, the thumbs up, which made it really easy for people to just doom scroll, to click this, and keep going without any meaningful sort of interaction. And I think as a result, everything has been completely skewed away from experiential and towards documentation of the experiential. And as a result, clubs have become much more sort of about spectacle and video walls, and then visuals. So you look at things now like the kind of anima style productions where the music is really underscoring what the visuals are doing, and that really is it. And as a result, the music has become way secondary to what's happening at the Sphere on the big screen and all the rest of it. And that there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. That's a way of doing it. But what's happened is it's happened at the expense of those small clubs, that the experience that people have had for many years dancing with a sense of togetherness and actually being in the moment with other people who are literally having the best moment of their lives in that moment, and I think that's a huge shame, because then the next logical step to that is that the music starts being doctored to suit this new kind of spectacle and this new visual world that we live in, and the kind of attention deficit that we seem to have developed as a result of doom scrolling. And you've got 3 seconds for your TikTok video to land with people, otherwise, so and the consequence of that is I got sent a track a few months ago. It's 1 minute 50 seconds long, and that was the extended mix, and the original mix was like 1 minute 20 or something. And what is happening? It's literally, like, where's the whole thing has just completely jumped the shark and gone into a world that I just don't recognize at all. And like I said earlier, it feels like that is the marketing wagging the tail of the dog, and the dog is the thing that is the creative animal that's trying to kind of communicate something or make something. And it just feels like a lot of that music to me is made by committee, and it's made by focus groups, and it has no real passion or flair or soul to it.
Well, one person that I just don't like his music, but I appreciate he was honest, is David Guetta, who came out and said, "I'm an entertainer, I'm not a DJ." And
Right.
that's basically what it is now. You've got the entertainers of the Tomorrowland, of Ultra, and you've got DJs that, are working their arse off in a small club or a pub or whatever. So, I appreciate that side, but I just think people are being hoodwinked.
Yeah.
As you know, especially in the UK, loads and loads of clubs are closing because the younger generation would rather pay this amount of money to go to a festival to see 30, top DJs who play an hour, rather than go see, Benny blah blah at the local club. I grew up going to see resident DJs, and especially Cream, Bugged Out, a Voodoo in Liverpool was just amazing to me. Sweat coming off the walls, but seeing that local lad start the night and play 2 hours to warm up for the headliner, and he put his heart and soul into it, or her heart and soul into it. And I miss those. The festivals are good, but it's just making the market for these clubs smaller and smaller. And I think the one good thing I think about the US is, I've had the best of both worlds. I grew up back home. I was in the rave scene, and then I came here in the late 90s. So I was based out of Savannah. So I would go to Orlando and Gainesville, which was progressive heaven. Sasha Digweed came there first. Dust Brothers, Chemical Brothers played their first show at DJ Icy's The Zone. And I was there to see it. And I was like, I'm having this. I want this, because it was just, I love my progressive house, but Chemical Brothers brought that acid tinged breaks And I was like, yes, I'll take that. Peter Tor was there, Basement Twins as well. And I was like, I'm having some of this. So I had the best of both worlds. And I just think kids over here are going to get sick of this festival circuit, and they're going to start looking for more underground stuff. You know,
Yep.
it might not be 100%, but I think 5 to 10% will be like, okay, I've had enough of the show that's going on here, and I want to go to this dirty, dingy club that's $10. You know, where I don't care what I look like. You know, I don't have to wear designer clothes. Well, you shouldn't wear them anyway. You're supposed to dance and sweat. Who
Yeah.
wants to sweat in a Gucci shirt, you know? So I think hopefully, you know, the US will set a precedent and get back to where it all started from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think that there's a tendency, always has been in any type of music, for things to be cyclical. Things always come back round. Usually it's on a sort of 15, 20-year cycle, and then people kind of rediscover this amazing thing called progressive house from the early 2000s. And, and there'll be new producers that come in that put their own kind of spin on it, which is great. That's how things have historically kind of moved forward. But yeah, it's I don't know. It certainly isn't what it used to be. It's just something different. And I get that, we do probably sound like a couple of old guys kind of moaning about it. I also get that there are lots of kids out there who are probably going to raves for the first time and having the time of their lives, and that's cool too. But I do miss those kind of dark rooms for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. And until the lights come on, and then you see everyone's face, and you go, "Ooh, okay."
Yeah, totally. Had a
We
few of
all know
those.
those days. Walking into the early morning sunlight, and looking like vampires. And
Yeah.
well, I definitely want to talk about Shadowmaker because obviously, like I said, Lunatic Calm, Elite Force, Zodiac. This is a massive like pull away from like dance music for you, and I know you've put your heart and soul into this. When did the idea come about?
It actually came about in 2019. So in 2017, I was having all kinds of health issues. Was really struggling with DJing. Like, some of my enthusiasm had gone from it. I was doing these shows called the One Series, which were like 7-hour sets and stuff, and that kind of kept me going for quite a while because it allowed me to dig into a much deeper pool of music and express to like basically talking about those sort of epic sets that we remember from maybe the early 2000s. Well, that was my way of kind of extending that lineage and giving myself a challenge as well, and really loved doing that. But I started having these health issues, and then I got diagnosed with a prolactinoma, which is a pituitary tumor, not life threatening or anything, and it's something I've been able to deal with medication. Um, but as a result, I had to really take my foot off the gas. I couldn't travel like I was doing previously. I couldn't keep up the same kind of schedule, and I also got divorced around that time, so it was a real perfect storm, and everything kind of um everything I really had to just regroup and rebuild. And actually the Shadowmaker came out of, okay, what happens if I start making music that isn't for the dance floor at all? Like, what, not only that, but through the prolactinoma and through the divorce, I had a couple of really good therapists, and I was such a closed book before that, but I became a lot more open to investigating thoughts and feelings and trying to process a lot of these really challenging life changes that were happening. And I needed music to be, a vessel to explore that more deeply. And in a lot of ways, I've always found music to be the primary way that I express my emotions. I've always found it easier to put it into music than I have to talk about it. And so it really felt like these songs sort of emerged from a need to express something that was deeply personal, and just try and kind of almost work through some of those life experiences in the hope as well that they would resonate with people. And we all have these experiences of love and loss, and separation, adoption, all of these things that I kind of dealt with in that album. And I wrote most of the music in 2019, and then I sat with it. I came back to it. I remastered it. I basically I sat there being really confused by what I'd made. It's like, what the hell am I going to do with this music when people know me primarily for filling dance floors and all the rest of it? But then I started looking back over the years and going right back to the first Lunatic Calm album. It's not necessarily Big Beat. It's not necessarily Leave You Far Behind. That is a track on there, but there's also like 10-minute long down tempo trip hop tracks. And the second Lunatic album, there's really interesting, slightly awkward ballads and vocal tracks and tunes in 7/8 time, and it's a real mixed bag. And then you even look at some of the, like, both of the Elite Force albums from the 2000s had tracks like Ring of Fire and Punk Electro and these kind of down tempo tunes that I think when I released those albums, they really confused the hell out of people. Because on the one hand, I'm releasing an album that is really quite musical and quite, I always saw albums as an opportunity to write a novel rather than a short story. So it was like, you want to explore all of those hidden kind of parts of your creative self. And so I think with the Shadowmaker, it was, once you take but I still need some dance floor bangers on here or whatever, you take that out the equation and you're really just making music that comes kind of directly from you and directly from your soul. And really gave myself permission to write lyrics, to sing again, to harmonize, to use whatever instrumentation I felt was right to express what I felt the song needed. And then eventually I kind of came back to it in last year in 2024. And it came out of this like mentoring session I did with a good friend of mine, Gabe Ratliff. And he just asked this very, very simple question, which was, how would you feel on your deathbed if you knew that this music had never seen the light of day? And I was kind of, I'd be gutted, and it had already been 5 years since I'd written a lot of it. So I was kind of, okay, well, I'll come back to it. I had this idea of one track, the Shadowmaker, of a production feel to it that was very different than the original demo versions that I'd done, which were more kind of indie orientated, I'd say. And I came back to it with this view that I'd produce it in a more of a similar way to how Billie Eilish produces her music with Phineas, which is almost reductively taking everything out until you have the absolute essence. Every single sound is intentional. The production is immaculate. The vocals, you work on them until they're perfect. And so I kind of went into it really with that in mind and came back to every track, wrote a few new ones as well. And at the end of it, I had an album that I was really incredibly proud of. So,
yeah, it's a very personal album to listen to. And I take some of the songs a different way than what you probably, when you wrote them. Chris Martin comes to mind. I saw a little interview with him and he said he has depression. So he writes 12 minutes a day. And I love that, just your thoughts, just random thoughts. And I feel like this album is a part of that, is your thoughts. But it really is. It's such a beautiful album, and I wish I could have been there in Denver to see you do the live show. Were you nervous? Because obviously it's a massive difference between getting up behind decks or getting up, and playing dance music, because this, like I said, is more personal for you.
I mean, I was nervous. I think I was nervous in the run up to it because um, like you say, the performance dynamics quite different. I think when you're DJing, at the end of the day, you're pressing play on a piece of finished music, whether it's yours or not, and that piece of finished music, unless you absolutely manage to balls it up in a way I haven't even managed, figured out, but that music is going to play from start to finish without issue. This is different. So it was really interesting going through the process of creating every track as sheet music, so notating everything, learning how to perform on the keyboards and sing at the same time, giving myself trying to work out how much material stayed on the sequence. I had a live drummer, Jez, from Lunatic Calm days, who was just amazing, super patient, incredibly gifted, and he was playing an entirely digital drum kit as well. So we could take whatever drum samples we wanted from the originals and get really close to what I created, but then with his own unique kind of live spin on it. So there were a lot of questions around like how much vulnerability do I have there in the performance? And actually, what I chose to do in the end was to create like quite a bit for myself to do, So yes, like I'm playing the keyboards almost throughout. I'm singing. The songs are very vocal based, so I'm singing pretty much throughout as well. So that there was a lot there. I wasn't particularly nervous on the night because I'd worked hard on it. Jez had come out a week early, and we'd had a whole week of rehearsals, and we'd really got to a point where it was very fluid. And actually, on the night, as I've often felt throughout the years, performance is almost feels like a safe space for me. It's almost like a meditation. I used to feel that when I was DJing, like everything surrounding like the performance, I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not like a huge fan of the socializing, the after partying, the kind of, whatever it might be. But I'm a huge fan of the music and the performance, and when I'm behind the decks, as when I was performing that night as well, I just feel like this sense of stillness and this sense of calm, and it actually, the show worked out great. The response, we got a standing ovation at the end, and it was just really lovely seeing that music being brought into the light like that.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of Sasha's Refracted Live, because I read that, he had to go back and learn the piano for nearly a year, and then we all see the fruits of that show, which was absolutely amazing. And, for you to, I mean, it takes some balls, because you are reinventing yourself again. Do you think you'll go back to the dance music side?
Well, it's interesting, like I had after the Shadowmaker or two off, which I was so burnt out. I was absolutely exhausted. I'm literally, I was pretty much the only person doing everything on that project, and it's like, you'll hear albums by bands, and the guitarist will write the guitar parts, perform them in the studio, and then someone else will take over. They'll engineer it, producer, mastering engineer, and I do everything. So it's and then all of the social stuff. So I took this break, my intention was always to come back to the tracks from the album and explore what they feel like when you remix them. And this is the whole kind of reconstructed idea. And um, it's almost like the sort of the more electronic side of things is very much part of the same brain that I have. And so I've started remixing some of the tracks from the album, and I'm actually up to 7 remixes now. And I've got an 8th one, which I'm about halfway through. I'm not necessarily remixing them as dance floor bangers. I think 1 or 2 of them probably are, and some of them are down tempo and whatever. It's more like it's more trying to come back to the music and explore what just a different side to the brain, how it interprets the music. So there will be an album's worth of there'll be a Shadowmaker reconstructed album that comes out towards the back end of this year. And I've also just started writing some new tracks for another album that will be in the Shadowmaker vein that will come out next year. And that's a kind of exploration of dream states. And that one will be called The Mirror Realm. So just started working on, I've got a couple of finished tracks there, and got a whole load of new bits and pieces on the go, which is exciting.
Do you think you'll take Shadowmaker on tour?
You know, I'd absolutely love to. Financially, I don't think I can afford to. So, you know, what I'm looking at the moment is a couple of other options. Like I'm quite into the idea of doing an evening with Simon Shackleton, which would be the first part of the evening would feature like live performance in the Shadowmaker vein, and the second part of the evening would feature kind of more of a reconstructed version of what you've heard. So and an extension of that into more kind of familiar like DJ territory. So I'm sort of exploring some options around that. I'm also quite aware that next year is the 30th anniversary of the first Elite Force releases. So, you know, so I've got a few cogs kind of turning on that front as to how I could maybe even put together a little celebratory tour that kind of almost like, you know, brings all of those pieces together from 30 years of work, you know.
Good Lord, 30 years.
No, don't.
That's just mental. And I mean, are you still, you know, obviously you and Mark, me, Katie, have put out so many tracks. Are you thinking of doing something with Mark again?
Not particularly. I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't be opposed to doing, but I'm such a solo traveler these days with music. You know, I'm in a fortunate enough position to be able to get up every day and basically make music, and you know, thankfully, I've had some really good like film and TV licenses over the years, and that, you know, that helps kind of keep my head above water. And you know, and DJing has obviously done that as well over the years. I don't particularly want to get back onto that kind of a schedule where I'm just pounding the pavement week in, week out. But I, you know, I'd like to be able to sort of dip my toe back into that world sort of periodically, because I do miss the performance aspect of things, and now I have this sort of additional string to the bow with the Shadowmaker. I'd like to factor that in as well, and you know, it's like how do you get all these pieces to sit together comfortably? I don't know.
Well, I'm liking what like Plump DJs and Crafty are doing these day raves. They're right down my alley. You know, I can be in bed by, you know, 11 o'clock at night. Yes, please. Let's do it in the US. More of the grand
100%.
raves. you know,
Yeah.
where you get there at 12 in the afternoon and you're in bed by 11 o'clock at night. So, all you promoters or whatever, start doing more of those and I'll come out.
I'm totally with you. I mean, I was funny enough, like a couple of years ago, I was going to start up a night called Pipe and Slippers, which was designed to be, it's like the whole premise of it was like you'll be in bed by 11. Don't worry about it. You're not going to miss the last trains home. And I actually think from clubs' perspectives as well, like why would you not want to open up between sort of 2 and 10 or something, and you can still do the late night thing as well, and I do think it's interesting because we are, obviously we've grown up with this music and we're the first generation that are getting to the point where like we need to consume it in a different way because we're older. But it's not to say that people still don't want to consume the music. They do. It's just they maybe just need a different sort of delivery mechanism.
Yeah, time wise.
Absolutely.
Well, Simon, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. And like I always say with my guests, when the conversation just flows, an hour just goes by so quickly when you're talking about things that you really care about. And, it's I can knock you off my bucket list now. It's just been brilliant. I've wanted you on here for a long time, and then finding out that you are a Liverpool supporter as well, like I said, is absolute. I've hit gold. Like,
Oh man,
really,
thank you.
I wish you all the best. And if you want to check out Simon's music, go to simonshackleton.bandcamp.com or simonshackleton.org, and you'll find everything on there. He's got the Elite Force revamped. I know somebody had asked you about the Lunatic Calm revamps. I saw that online the other day, and I think you said that you that wasn't in the works or something. Or
Well, I'm actually in the process now of finally, after many, many years, like releasing a whole bunch of Lunatic Calm material that has been sat on my hard drive for 30 years, some of it. I'm not quite sure why we didn't get that stuff out, but I'm releasing it now because I really want it to get up on the, especially on the streaming services, because they do tend to have quite a long tail. And I just got an Elite Force track license to the new Mobland series, so it's it's really cool. It's really cool that there's still a really sizable audience for the Lunatic Calm stuff. And bizarrely enough, like year on year, our numbers grow by 35 to 40% on Lunatic Calm online. So it's it's not going away, and just makes sense to sort of drip feed some of this archival material out there. So there's going to be it's basically an album called More Lunatic Than Calm, which comes out in August of this year. And then there's a More Calm Than Lunatic, which is obviously more of the down tempo stuff. And then a second volume of the More Lunatic Than Calm coming out next year. So absolute ton of music hitting the pavement this year from me.
well, I can't wait to hear it. Like I always say, please put your earbuds on. Please go find new artists, new music to listen to, and not the same old, top 40 stuff. Look for it, and if a band's in town that you don't know of, maybe go check them out, and that might be your favorite band for the rest of your life. You just don't know. There's so much good music out there that you just have to kind of find it. It's like going to a record shop and digging and digging and digging until you find that one gem that you really love. So, just do that and it'll make you much, much happier. Simon, thank you so much again. I can't wait, May 25th, lift that number 20 title. I'm sure you'll be running around the house just like me. And then the next day, our backs all have gone.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
we'll be putting the slippers on and maybe the pipe. But thanks everyone for listening. Please subscribe, put your notifications on. Take care of one another and stay safe. And we'll see you next time.